Hello and welcome to another big interview at Guinness PRO14 with me, Sean Holley, and our very special guest today, Connacht head coach Andy Friend. Andy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Sean. Good to see you.
How's lockdown treating you? You're going a little bit stir crazy. You know, us rugby coaches want to be out there on the field, but it's tough times.
Yeah, listen, I think we do want to be on the field, but it is what it is at the moment, isn't it? So we're trying to make the most of it, mate. Spending some good time with my wife, spending some good time having Zoom chats, learn about Zoom chats, which we never knew about before. Doing a lot of walking, a lot of riding, a lot of reading, getting prepared for when we do come back. So yeah, it's not all bad.
So how have you been keeping in touch with your players? Now you've learned how to do some Zoom and StreamYard and whatever else, FaceTime. Are you connecting? Are you keeping in touch with them?
We are. When we all went into this, we said there's three big things for us as a squad that we really wanted to focus in on. Number one, do whatever you need to do to keep yourself and your family safe. So, and everyone's in a different situation. Some have got kids at home, some haven't. Some have got live with elderly parents. Some are living on their own. Some are in group houses. But whatever you need to do, keep yourself and your family safe. Number two, stay connected. So exactly that point. Like, you know, I think one of the great things with footy programs is, and you probably only notice it now when you don't have it, you're always connected. You're always chatting to, you know, to someone, and you're sharing part of their life and they're sharing part of yours. And so we just wanted to make sure we didn't stop doing that. And we've done that in various ways. Our leadership group's been brilliant. They've split the squad up amongst themselves. Our coaches and management have been touching base with different people, whether it's via Zoom chats or WhatsApp or phone calls, whatever it is. So we stay connected. And the third thing we said, do something or come back better at something. So whatever that is, it might be, you might be fitter. Hopefully not fatter. You might be a better cook. You might be a better husband. You might be a better reader, done more study, whatever it is, but be better at something. And you know, to date, everyone seems to be living those three things.
You know, I get it a lot, having coached for a long period like yourself, that it's technical and tactical. But what you're saying there is, and what a lot of the lay person doesn't realize or seem to forget, is a very human side to being a coach, especially a head coach, isn't there? Because you've got your conditioners, your other technical coaching staff, your physios, your team manager, and so on. Certainly coming from the Southern Hemisphere and having such a broad experience in your career of coaching, that's something that you've clearly brought to the Connacht squad, yeah?
Yeah, I think everything's about connection. You know, it's about building trust, building rapport, building trust with your players and your staff. You know, showing that, well, hopefully living the values that you preach. Character's everything. So that level of connection for me with players and that human side, as you talk about, if you haven't got that, it doesn't matter how good technically or tactically you are, it'll fall over. So, yeah, I remember the great Napoleon quote: "Give me a mile of ribbon, I'll conquer the world." So if I can keep putting pins on people's chests and telling them how good they are, and you know that I'm happy with what they're doing, and you know you can build a lot with that.
Yeah, it's easy to knock people, isn't it? But giving praise and building people up is a different matter. Now, I want to talk, before we get to Connacht, which is very, very important for us, a little bit about your career. You've really travelled the world, been very successful, and had some unique experiences. So, you know, going back to originally working with the Waratahs and the Brumbies, of course, working with Eddie Jones at the Brumbies, and then kicking on to the Australian team in 2002-03. Some amazing names in that squad, working with Eddie Jones, George Gregan, Larker, Matt Gitto, Matt Burke, Sterling Mortlock, Joe Roth. The list is endless. Give us an insight into what it was like working with those greats, and also maybe not winning the 2003 World Cup.
I'll start with the happiest story, and that's working with those greats. Listen, you know, as you know, Sean, they're just people as well, aren't they? They just happen to be very, very talented at what they do. But, you know, we're probably like everyone else at the moment, we're watching the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan, and there's just so many similarities with, you hear him talking about how he's so driven and he wants to get the best out of himself and everybody else. And with the great athletes, that's what you see. You know, you take Jordan's head off and you put a Gregan's head on. It's the same bloke saying the same message, probably doing it his own way. But I just love their energy and just their drive for success. It's yeah, as you say, I have been very, very fortunate to work with some great athletes, but I think there's one common trait, and that's just their absolute drive to succeed and be the best they can. It's pretty powerful when you see that. But on to 2003, yeah, it was, my wife shares with me, she said, I've only ever cried twice in a rugby game, and that was the first time when Johnny Wilkins had kicked that goal. But what an amazing England team, and it's just a great atmosphere. And it's only 17 years ago, but you look where Australian rugby was then, and sadly you look at where it is now, and it's basically like looking at what was a lush pasture, and now you're looking at a desert, and it's frightening what's happening in the last 17 years.
Yeah, it is. We talked about it on the End of the Sticks podcast a lot, and it's really sad to see that the things are going on there. Hopefully it'll adjust itself. But going back to talking about driven individuals, I mentioned Eddie Jones there, and I've met Ed a couple of times, and I've spoken to a lot of coaches that have worked with him. He's a hard taskmaster. He's a real driver of a man himself, a workaholic. What was your relationship like working with Eddie? Did you get on with him?
Yeah, I did. I did get on with it. I certainly respected his views on things. But I think one of the things, in order to get on well with Eddie, at some stage you got to stand for something. And we probably had our moment, probably 18 months, maybe 12 to 18 months into our relationship. And now knowing Eddie 20 years ago, or for 20 years I've known him, but at the time I wasn't sure what the hell was going on. But he was basically challenging my thoughts on something, and I now know it was probably a test, just saying, well, is this bloke prepared to back himself, or is he going to be someone who I can ride over the top of? And I stood my ground. It was quite a confrontational. You can imagine two Aussies having a go at each other. We tend to be quite vocal individuals, Australians, and not many P's and Q's minded, but it was reasonably vocal, and I walked out. The next day he was fine, and ever since then we've never had another issue. So I think Eddie's got a great way of testing people. He wants to know whether you actually stand by your thoughts and your comments. But ever since that moment, and in fact leading up to that moment, he's been a brilliant mentor for me, and a great friend, and someone I've learned a lot off. So I owe him a lot.
Well, that's great to hear, and obviously staying with England, and lots more to achieve with them. Now, after coming to Harlequins, being head coach there, you went off to Japan for a different experience for 4 seasons. Were you surprised the way they entertained the last World Cup there? I was there. What a fantastic experience it was. They performed as well. Is that something that you learned when you were in the Japanese culture?
Yeah, Japan, it was always going to be a great World Cup. You just know the way the Japanese are. Like, they're such a proud nation, and everything's about image. Everything, it has to be right. So I was really impressed with the way the Japanese played, and a real credit to Jamie Joseph and his coaching staff there, and the whole staff there, and the players. I thought they were brilliant. But just watching, the Japanese supporters get behind the whole World Cup was fantastic, and I didn't get there, unfortunately, Sean, but you could see it was a great event, and you knew it was going to be a great event. We loved our time there, really. In the end, we had 7 years in total, a stint of 3, then a stint of 4 years. But brilliant times for us as a young family, and lots of good memories coming out of that.
Yeah, amazing country. The culture and the people. I'd never been, and I didn't know what to expect. And yeah, I'd go back. I'd take my family back. It was an amazing place. But now you were one of the few coaches that have experienced something that is pretty unique in rugby. You coached the Australian Sevens team, and you were fortunate enough to go to the Rio Olympics. Now, Ben Ryan was in university with me. We were in the same class. I played in the same team as him at university. So he's obviously written his book and done well around that. But you being there as a coach with your team in Rio in an Olympics, which for a rugby coach player like you and I would be extremely unique. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, it was a unique experience. It really was. I'd only started in the job in January of that year, so I came in 2016, and it was obviously later on that year that we ended up in Rio de Janeiro. It was fantastic to be there. Again, I think as a young sports person, everyone, well, I certainly did. I wanted to represent the Olympics, because growing up that was the biggest event. We didn't have World Cups in rugby back then, but So to finally get to Olympics, not as an athlete but as a coach, was a real buzz. It was pretty special. I also remember though feeling, and I say to people, it was an awkward experience because, you know, here we are in Rio de Janeiro, which is it's not a very affluent city, and there's a lot of favelas there and a lot of people living on the poverty line there. And to be honest, Sean, it felt quite awkward. You know, here we are, there's this movement, this big Olympic movement coming into town, and you know, and living the life that we live, which is comfortable. Yet you knew two miles down the road there's deaths happening and there's people not with a lot going on. So it did feel uncomfortable. I will say that, and because it was uncomfortable, but at the same time, brilliant to be part of an Olympic Games.
Yeah, lots of great experiences, but I want to bring it right forward to Connacht now, and I want to ask you, like a man with your CV, your experience, your ability, you could have taken your pick of jobs. What was it that attracted you to Connacht and maybe the Guinness PRO14 as a competition?
Well, yeah, it probably sounds like I could, but you can't. Life's all about time. So at the time,
I haven't coached for 4 years, mate.
But I will say this: what struck Kerry and I, my wife, we'd come across to Connacht to meet with them, and yeah, listen, we actually had a couple of options that we were looking at the time, but when we met the people, and that was Willie Rowan, our CEO, and the interview panel that interviewed us, I was so impressed. You could see they were genuine people. And it's everything we've probably experienced since that. It's you know, the west of Ireland as it's, you know, as a country itself, but also the west of Ireland. I think in order to live here, you've got to be a special type of person, and you know, they tend to be, from my experience, our experience, they're very honest people. They're soul of the earth people, and what they tell you is what's going to happen. And you could smell that straight away as soon as we walked in. But the other part of it, as you say, is the Pro 14. You know, I've coached in Super Rugby before, and I love that cross-border competition. Super Rugby, when I was coaching it, was New Zealand, South Africa, and Australia. But here we were coming into a Pro 14, which had Italians in it, had Scots in it, had Welsh in it, had obviously the Irish and the South African. So it just had that feel of an old Super Rugby competition, which I loved back in the day when we were coaching Super Rugby, and I haven't been disappointed with it. It's a great competition.